Welcome to the France 24 debate. Welcome to St. Petersburg, hometown of one Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. Just when U.S.-Russia relations seem headed for a deep freeze unseen since the Cold War, luck of the calendar has it, President Putin's hosting a G20 summit. With Moscow steadfastly blocking retaliation against Syria at the UN, is this just another talk shop photo op? Or can the G20 succeed where the Security Council has so far failed in brokering a breakthrough on a conflict that's claimed more than 100,000 lives and chased 1/3 of Syrians from their homes? Many see this moment as sweet revenge for a Putin who felt snubbed by the scale of Western intervention in Libya. But just how strong today is the position of a leader re-elected last year on the back of a steady diet of anti-U.S. campaign rhetoric? Today, in the France 24 debate, we're looking at Vladimir Putin, the G20 coming to the court of Vladimir Putin. With us from Moscow, Elena Milzanovska, journalist at the newspaper Sobyonetsk. Sorry, let me get the pronunciation right.
Собеседник.
Go ahead.
Собеседник.
Собеседник. There we go. You can thank you for being with us from Moscow. You can read her Saturday column fortnightly in the International Herald Tribune. Celestine Bolan, welcome back to the France debate. Also with us, Emma Suleiman of the Syrian Opposition Syrian National Coalition. There we are. And from Washington, Bruce Stokes of the Pew Research Center's Global Attitudes Project. The France 24 debate on Facebook and on Twitter, where you have been reacting using the hashtag F24debate. Now, barely a mention of Syria at the official opening of the G20 before an organization brought to life by the financial crisis. Vladimir Putin instead sticking to topic. He did nonetheless promise to bring up the matter at the official dinner. I'll begin with you, Celestine Bolan. It's so hard with these G20 summits because, everything's filtered and everything. All we can look at, I guess, is body language of that handshake we saw at the outset there between Obama and Putin.
Right. And their body language hasn't been very good over the last, 2 years, I'd say. So, I think more attention than usual even paid to that. But, at the end of the day, I'm not sure that that counts. I think that they need to talk and they will somehow manage. I'm not quite sure when or how, but, at the end of the day, both of them are, looking to put forth their views and convince other people. I think more Obama, obviously, has more convincing to do because he's the one set to do something, whereas Putin is in the position of just sitting back and observing. But he has to also make his case for his position, I think.
He has to make his case. We'll pick up on that point. And there's again, as I said at the outset, Bruce Stokes, there's the timing of all of this because last 2 days, Barack Obama's been meeting with congressional leaders and they're building up to a vote on whether or not to follow the president in Washington. It's sort of strange for him to be jetting off to St. Petersburg and then coming back.
Well, in terms of timing of getting a congressional approval for this proposed military action, I think the juxtaposition with the G20 meeting could not have been more inopportune for the president, because once he decided to go to Capitol Hill to get their approval, it would have probably behooved him to be able to move rapidly to do that. But the juxtaposition of the president leaving town and the Jewish holidays made it difficult to move for a rapid vote in Congress. As a result, we now don't expect a congressional vote probably until next week at the earliest.
In time, is it on Barack Obama's side? From what you're saying, Bruce, it sounds like it's not, that the longer the wait there is before a vote, the less chance he has of getting Congress to follow him.
Well, the initial reaction, I think, has been in the first couple of days since the briefings of Congress began, is that it's likely it will pass the Senate, but have more trouble in the House. But there seemed to be momentum building even in the House with the Republican leadership coming out in favor of this vote. That said and done, we know that with almost any of these decisions, not unlike a fish, the longer it sits on the table, the more it smells. And I think that the danger the administration would face is that the longer the delay in a vote, the more exceptions that people may raise, the more fiddling with the language that might be made. And we also have to worry about, at least the administration has to worry about, whether you get one version of this authorizing legislation from the Senate and a separate and different language from the House. Then you have to go to a conference committee. That delays things. And it's not at all clear how limited the president's options would be by that point.
All right, but before I go to Emma Suleiman, let's go to St. Petersburg in Russia and France 24's very own Annette Young. Annette, President Putin saying that Syria would be brought up during dinner. Did it sound like it would be the conversation starter, or as they say in French, the topic you mentioned between the digestif and the dessert?
Well, certainly, Francois, it's the elephant in the room, because according to the official schedule, there's no mention of Syria, which of course is somewhat ironic, given that's all we're now talking about. We don't really know when and how and in what form these discussions are going to take place during the dinner. And the reason that it isn't on the official program means as a result, there's a lot of impromptu, sort of organic discussions happening on the sidelines. You know, often rooms attached to the meeting rooms and people being pulled off corridors and frantic discussions going on between advisors of various leaders to set up sort of, gatherings on the peripheries. Of course, we're not expecting at this stage an official meeting to happen between President Obama and President Putin. But having said that, both the White House and one of Putin's presidential aides say that they're not closed to the idea of an impromptu discussion. And I do find it rather hard to believe that those two men, despite the fact they have such vastly different opinions on what to do in regards to Syria, will pass up the opportunity to discuss the situation. It's certainly becoming more serious by the moment. We've heard news in the last couple of hours of Russian warships steaming across the Bosphorus in the direction of Syria. We've got, this Congress vote happening next week, and you've also got 18 other world leaders here in this palace just behind me, also very concerned about what is going to happen in regards to Syria. Having said that, you've got two very opposing views. I mean, these two men are diametrically opposed to one another, but in between them, there's 18 or so nuanced views as to what is the right way to deal with this worsening crisis.
Annette, you mentioned the back-channel activity. Now, these that's going on around you, these summits, I know they're always carefully scripted. You personally, what do you feel has been the biggest surprise so far?
Well, I have to point out, because you just said it, it's a really staged, managed event. And this is the closest I have got to where these leaders are. We've been kept in the media pit, as I've dubbed it, which is several kilometres down the road from the Petershof Palace. So it's very hard to get that colour, that sense of what really is going on. We get sort of live feeds now and then. Watching, and we all are becoming experts in reading body language, in trying to sort of read the sort of signals, the signs that are happening as these men and women meet. In terms of impromptu things that were not stage managed, at this point I can't really tell you, but one interesting story, which of course has caused a lot of raised eyebrows, which gives you a sense of how carefully stage managed this event is the fact that the Russians decided at the last minute to change the seating order and use the English alphabet as opposed to the Russian alphabet. Now, if they use the Russian alphabet, basically there'd be one seat, that occupied by the Saudi prince, between President Obama and President Putin. Now they're using the English alphabet. There's now 5 nations between the two, which means there's not going to be any awkward, unstaged glances between the men that might be captured on camera.
All right. Annette Young, thanks for that. Annette Young following the G20 summit in St. Petersburg for us. Okay, so Emma Suleiman, you heard Annette Young say that Syria has managed to invite itself onto the agenda. It wasn't on there at the outset. That there are these talks going on in side rooms and everything. What are your expectations from the G20?
From the G20, we don't expect much as long as Russia continues to do Assad's diplomacy. I mean, they have announced that they will continue taking Assad's side, and it's so sad because Russia has taken the dictator's side in the region.
You heard Bruce Stokes mention how it slows down Obama's momentum if he's trying to get a vote passed in Congress, the timing of this summer. But when you see the fact that there is discussion going on, does that make you hopeful or indifferent, pessimistic?
At this moment, all we have is hope. especially that it has been taking a very long time. And the more it takes, the more Assad will continue killing the people. He did not stop the bombardment until today. So we all we have is hope today, but we don't expect much. Let's be honest.
All right, a fresh sign that Barack Obama and Vladimir Putin will not be going on vacation together. The United States' envoy to the UN, Samantha Power, has just come out with a statement saying Russia continues to hold the UN Security Council hostage on Syria. That too must be timed with what's going on.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like there's been some interesting kind of hints. I don't know that you should put too much stock in them, but Putin, in his interview with AP and the first Russian channel, said he wouldn't rule out a military response if it was proved that, understood in the sentence was if it was proved that chemical weapons had been used. He then went off in a kind of a tangent, to be honest. And I think that you have to look at it a little bit from the Russian point of view. I mean, the fact of the matter is that they have taken a position that they've always taken. They don't like intervention. They feel they were snookered in Libya. They don't want that to happen again. But at the same time, I feel as though they need to prove their case, which is that the chemical attack was carried out by the other side. Because they've also said, and he said it in his interview, chemical warfare is a crime. So, if the evidence presented is compelling enough, might he find himself in a kind of a box? He doesn't really care about public opinion, but he cares about international diplomacy. I think there may be some wiggle room.
Maybe some wiggle room. 2 points. First of all, you just saw those images of those world leaders heading to that dinner where they'll be talking about Syria. France 24 viewers divided when we put the question to you of whether the G20 or the UN Security Council is the more relevant forum for sorting out a situation like Syria. Sabine saying, I prefer the G20 because the UN is slow in taking a decision. And also using the hashtag F24 debate. Céline Bardet saying, indeed, not a question of preference, a question of political action under an international legal framework. She believes that the UN is the place to go to sort out these differences. Yelena Milzanovska, let me ask you, how do your readers feel about the allegations that Assad used chemical weapons against his own people? Do they contest that allegation, or do they feel as though it's Assad?
No, I think I really support Assad, and I believe that he could not do such things. And also, until America won't show any real proofs or documents on G20 or after it, we cannot judge about it, really. And I truly believe that Assad could not do such things.
What makes you feel as though it wasn't Assad that did it? What do you see as the reason why?
No, one of the reasons there is International Chess Association, and his head, Kirsan Alimzhinov, he's quite famous man in Russian. Once I made an interview with him, and he told me about his personal meeting with Bashar Assad, and after conversation with him, I think that he's a good man, and he definitely is not a man who could do such things.
All right, so you're convinced that it wasn't Assad. Emma Suleiman.
Unfortunately, this is all we see on Russian media, who are in Syria at the moment and producing all these videos. I mean, here we understand Russia's fear of jihadists, obviously because of previous experience in Chechnya. But the Russian intelligence services that in Syria, and they know where these extremist elements come from and where they were liberated from. Again, here I would like to say that we wish that Russia would take the right side and take the people's side, because, I mean, they have sided the dictators in the region and lost interest in this area. And now they're still playing this card, hoping that, or supporting Assad to win. And betting on the fact that the people in Syria would not win, even after 30 months of revolution, whether when it was peaceful, and now when it moved to armed revolution. Speaking of chemical weapon, I mean, let's talk about the basic facts. These chemical weapon, everyone who was killed were civilians, 1,500 civilians, and they were in the opposition-controlled area, plus the bombardment came from Assad-controlled area. These are like basic facts. So in addition to the fact that we have doctors and journalists who were on the ground and who brought evidence with them. Assad media themselves confirmed the use of chemical weapon. Iran confirmed the use of chemical weapon. So chemical weapon use was confirmed. Now, who has used it? There is a report by the American and the French intelligence service that confirms. Mr. Hollande said yesterday that Assad has
the report by those two services, and coming out ahead of course, the UN report, and yet the BRICS, that group of emerging giants, they staged their own side meeting at the G20 summit earlier, and they put out a statement expressing wariness about an intervention. Bruce Stokes, they seem to be siding more with Putin than with Obama. How do you explain that?
Well, I think the challenge all these leaders face is that their publics do not want to get involved. We've done a survey in the United States. Others have done surveys in the United States. In our survey, 48% of the American public are against involvement. Only 29% are in favor of involvement, a military strike because of these use of chemical weapons. But you see the same in Britain. Very strong support for Parliament opposing the British going with the Americans on some kind of military strike. The French public is in favor of a UN intervention, but not a French participation in that intervention. The German public is strongly against intervention. So these leaders face public opinion problems at home. And based on our experience in other kinds of interventions, such as the bombing of Serbia and so forth, what we find is that across the board, basically publics are against these things when they start, then support spikes right after they start because there's a rally around the flag, and then the support begins to wane very rapidly as these things become a prolonged issue. So from a political point of view, these leaders face a real dilemma.
A real dilemma, and
something that their publics don't support.
A real dilemma all around, and a real dilemma as well for Vladimir Putin to a certain degree. We'll see how when we come back. You're watching the France 24 debate.